Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back. Great group today. It's an exciting day. Before I came into the auditorium, I was helping some visitors who asked, "Are you guys graduation?" I said, "No, we're not graduation," but I helped them find graduation. Our just under 100 Watkins Glen High School seniors are graduating, I believe, right about now, very soon. And that's so exciting. And this is happening all over New York State today. So for those of you who have had students graduate, congratulations to all of us. And it's just, I love graduation. Anyway, I love this too. And today we're going to have a really exciting program. It's always so wonderful to see everyone come back. And I'm sorry for the new folks with us. My name's Glenda. I work over at the center. Sorry about that. So, as always, it's my honor to be the one who gets to introduce J.C. Argetsinger, our president, and that's what I'm going to do now. So here's J.C.
Well, thank you, and welcome to our second in our series of the Motor Racing Research Center's Talks on Great Tracks. And we have a real treat for you today. Will Edgar has come a long distance from California, Northern California. I think it took him 14 or 15 hours by plane and courier and car and whatever. But this will be a wonderful, wonderful talk. I just spent this morning reading the terrific article that Will just published online about Carroll Shelby. It's a fantastic history of the 56, 57, 58 season. Carroll was driving for Team Edgar, and Will was there every minute of it, taking pictures and taking notes. It was just a fantastic era of motor racing. Will and I came of age at the same time, and to us, that is the most exciting era. Now, I see many of our friends here. They know about our mission at the Motor Racing Research Center, and they know that we are here because of the generosity of people like themselves. We have a wonderful sponsorship list. I think all of you are sponsors of our library. We have a wonderful new raffle car. If you haven't seen that, that goes to the benefit of the library. The tickets are selling fast. They are. I'm not just hyping that. It's a very popular Boss 302 Mustang. But also, for those of you who haven't seen Michael Argetsinger's wonderful book, The 20 Years of Grand Prix Racing at Watkins Glen, that is on sale. Its price is $50, and every penny of it goes to benefit the Motor Racing Research Library. I think there's a $4 tacked on that goes to Governor Como, but the $50 purchase price is for the benefit. Michael, as you know, has written 3 or 4 award-winning books, 2 of them on Mark Donohue and Walt Hanskin, and this is his 4th in a series. Now, Michael is going to give the proper introduction to Will Edgar, but I just do want to say a word or two about Michael. He's been racing for nearly 50 years, sports car racing, sedans, Formula 3 racing, Formula Ford racing, and he has raced, I think, in 54 different tracks in 7 different countries, nearly 50 years. He started when he was 10, I believe. So Michael Argetsinger, Michael has been on the council, the governing council of the Motor Racing Research Library since its inception, when it was formed in 1999. Michael Argetsinger, my brother.
Well, thank you. As usual, my brother has given me a really nice introduction, and I thank him for that. It's so good to see a really strong crowd on a beautiful day, and we are all in for a tremendous treat. Riverside, this is, as you can see from all the things on display at the center, we're really celebrating West Coast racing and really culminating with the opening of Riverside in 1957. The man we have speaking today brings a very unique and special perspective to what he's going to tell us. Will, is in his own right, established himself as one of America's great researchers and writers in the area of motorsports, and and currently writes for magazines that include Vintage Motorsport, Bimmer, Corvette, Excellence, Forza, all magazines most of us know. He's also online regularly with Sports Car Digest, Veloce Today, Classic Car, and others. He's written for the Robb Report and for Vintage Race Car Journal, for Road and Track, and in England for Octane and the MG Enthusiast magazine. So in his own right, Will is a formidable figure, an important figure in maintaining the literature and the history, just as we're also interested in, by witness us being here today and being part of the research center. As JC said, it's your support. We have no government support. We have no corporate or any other entity backing us. It's all through the donations of people like all of you. So we thank you for it. I should also mention that it isn't just as a writer that Will distinguishes himself. He has, for many, many years, been an outstanding producer. He's done over 300 television titles, sports documentaries on major figures, and in the racing side, it's included Jackie Stewart, Sam Posey, Peter Revson. He did a lot on ABC's Championship Auto Racing Series. He wrote, directed, and produced, I bet you most of us know this title, Once Upon a Wheel. A very famous and wonderful piece. He also did Behind the Wheel with Jackie Stewart and much, much more. There's a great deal I could say about Will, and you're going to learn a lot about him today. It is worth mentioning that Will, I mentioned that Will has this unique perspective, and it comes from being the son of John Edgar. Now, John Edgar is the guy that ultimately was responsible for Riverside being built, and he capitalized it and made it happen and owned it for those early years. Beyond that, however, he really was the guy that really made West Coast racing big time, along with Tony Paravano, certainly, and Van Newman and other figures. They were great figures, but none loomed larger than John Edgar in his professionalism, but he also brought a great spirit of fun to the sport. I have likened him, and I hope Will forgive me, but if you think about Briggs Cunningham, and we all know what Briggs meant to Northeast racing, in that same period of time, John Edgar was very much the Briggs Cunningham of West Coast racing. John did it in a distinctly California style. The man had a lot of style, as does his son Will, and John's wife, Will's mother. They were serious racers, but they had a lot of fun doing it, as you'll discover in this talk. Carroll Shelby's national championships, all his fame winning the multiple races in the great Ferraris of the time, those were all John Edgar cars. And just about everybody you can think of who became, from Dan Gurney to Richie Ginther and many, many other, Phil Hill, so many West Coast drivers can thank John Edgar, and that's, so it was a wonderful era, and we're going to hear all about it, and I'd like to bring to the podium, well, just before I come to that, I promised Randy Cook that I would ask everyone to turn off their cell phone, and I've already turned mine off. So that would be really appreciated by everyone involved. But now it's a thrill to bring a person I count it now as a dear friend and a writer I've admired for many years to the podium, Will Edgar. Will?
Okay. Well, thank you, Michael, and I'm glad everybody's here today. How are you all? Anyway, this is the first day of summer, isn't it? Glad to see you. I've got a little bit to read here. Michael has already pretty much covered who I am and what I would hope to be. I'm William Edgar, professionally. I've flown in from San Francisco, as Michael explained, after many hours. A couple of years ago, Michael and I met at the Collier Museum Symposium in Naples, Florida, where we shared the like visions of the finer aspects of motorsport journalism and are both acknowledged scribblers and blabbers. So, and we're bounded by the media and the mania of our passion and trade. I might mention that a byproduct of my presence here will be an article I'll write on the center and its vital work to preserve motor racing history and its prized archive materials, to be published later this year in Vintage Motorsport magazine. So if you see me taking some pictures around here, that's what those are for. My father, from his first foray into outboard hydroplanes during the 1920s and early 30s, then orchestrating the speed record Vincent HRD on the Bonneville Salt Flats in 1948. You probably know the picture of Rolly Free in his bathing suit, insanely riding this machine across the bare salt. And on through my father's several race car modifications of an MGTC, which you'll see here, but I guess the picture, oh, my elbow did that. Let's put this over here. And on to the pioneering Edgar Enterprises racing teams of the 50s with its Ferraris, Porsches, and Maseratis, ultimately culminating with the funding of construction of Riverside International Raceway. And that, in effect, altogether traces the arc of American West Coast sports car racing from the late 40s to the advent of the 60s. The definitive history of that era and region in American sports car racing can be found between the hardcovers of a book that I co-authored with Michael T. Lynch and Ron Paravano called American Sports Car Racing in the 1950s, a work that earned us the Dean Bachelor Award for Excellence in Motorsport Journalism. But what I bring to you today is not that book, nor its definitive 170-page history, but rather a more focused, intimate glimpse at those times, pardon me, out on the West Coast, the left coast as we called it, when so much was afoot there in shaping both the cars and drivers of the sports car racing scene. The photographs you will see here are drawn from the Edgar Motorsport Archive, originally built by John Edgar from his own photographs and those photographers who presented him with their pictures, along with pictures that I shot as well. I celebrated my 20th birthday during that March of 1953 when Jack McAfee won the main at Palm Springs, driving my father's Ferrari 340 America. So in my quite not yet mature age today, I can say that I was fortunate to have lived in the 1950s as an adult and full capacity to toss back whiskey with the best of them, race car owners and drivers alike, sometimes on the very eve of the race, and I'm including drivers in that, including Mr. Shelby, but not Mr. Hill. It was the way of the times, and I hope you enjoy your excursion back to those days through what you're about to see here on the screen. So I'll narrate as we go, from what I know through research and from having actually witnessed the times and places. And I ask you to please hold any questions till after the show. Thank you. So, Michael, if you can put that microphone down there, and I'll bring the mouse over. What you've been staring at for the past few minutes is a pardon me. Again, let me position the mic here. What you've been staring at for the last few minutes is a picture of two cars that my father owned. They were posed at the Palm Springs Airport for promotion of the race at Palm Springs. The one on the right is 410 Sport. What's going on? Okay. It's not anybody from outer space, huh? Let me hold this thing. Maybe I'll just hold this. The 410 Sport on the right with Carol Shelby at the wheel. The 375 Plus on the left. That's Jack McAfee sitting there. And that car won Le Mans in 1954 under Froilan Gonzalez, the Pampas Bull, and Maurice Trintignant. And then it was a Pininfarina body, but you'll see here that it's a Scaglietti, because the car was crashed in Mexico in 1954 and then rebodied later by my father to continue its racing career. The woman in the center, I wish I knew where she was. Her name was Stephanie Bruton, and she was Miss Palm Springs in 1956. So hello, Stephanie, wherever you are. Now, I don't know why we're getting that. What's the feedback coming from? Huh?
Turn the fan off so it's not.
No, it's something.
Feedback from your speakers.
Have patience, please. I guess it is feedback from the speaker. Are we going to dim the lights at this point?
Yes.
So we can get started with the show. Oh, can everybody see the screen well enough back there? Is the resolution okay? Okay, it's not too bright in here? Is this microphone working even? Okay. All right. Are you going to be all right, Ron, with this light? Ron is our video photographer here. Self-explanatory is the title. Here we are with those same cars at the famous watering hole called the Biltmore Hotel in Palm Springs, long since gone, but this is where all the action was, and the bongo parties and everything pre-race and during race and after race happened around the pool here. And you'll see the same characters there, Shelby and McAfee. And Stephanie again, there she is. I guess this is me. In 1936, this is my first car, pedal power. So I started early. I became kind of a maverick during my teens. You may remember the Muntz Jets. Moved on to the races and watching my father and his team do their stuff. I always wanted to drive myself, and I remember saying, why can't I drive the MG or the Alpha? And they said, well, Jack drives the MG and Skip Hudson drives the Alpha. And I said, well, that wasn't my question. I said, why can't I? And he said, well, Jack drives the MG and Skip drives the Alpha. So I kind of got the hint then that he didn't want me to drive. So I did other things. I got married. This is my first wife, Patty, and this was the 300 SL that we campaigned with Paul O'Shea and Harry Jones. These are the things I do today. This is the great 1935 Nürburgring Grand Prix winner P3 that John Shirley now owns. Tazio Nuvolari drove the car in the race and outclassed. He was the underdog. He outclassed all the German cars. And in fact, when it came time for the winner to have the presentation, no one had the Italian national anthem except Tazio. He carried one in his briefcase. And it infuriated the Germans when he played it, because this was 1935. An Italian car should not win the German Grand Prix, but it did, especially when it was an underdog. Anyway, this is my father with his favorite speed graphic camera. He took a lot of the pictures that you'll see here. Can everyone hear me all right? All right. That was at, well, we know him. That's Carroll Shelby and his wife, Jean, sitting on a 300 SL, or rather a 300S Maserati that we had at Elkhart Lake. Richie Ginther, the wonderful Richie, in one of John von Neumann's car, and the man with the false teeth is Lester New Hampkin. He shot a lot of these pictures. This is probably about the only one he didn't shoot when he was around clowning around. But this was the kind of the atmosphere. What we're trying to do here, I think, is this is all kind of old news, but if you can put yourself into the pictures and feel what the times were, and what the cars look like, what the people look like, what the spectators look like, then it's totally different than now. And some will argue that it's better now, but you know, I kind of like the way it was. But we'll move on from that point. This is the car that Skip was driving that I didn't drive, the Veloci, Giulietta Veloci. This happened to be at Santa Barbara. Wonderful little car. That's Joe Landecker, our mechanic. He was a trucker to begin with. He brought his trucking abilities and ways to sports car racing because his favorite tools were mallet, screwdriver, crescent wrench, and tin snips. And that's the way he worked on these cars now that people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to restore perfectly. Well, Joe is out there whacking them with a hammer and doing whatever is going to make them run. Luigi Canetti, a good friend of my father's and from whom my father bought his cars. This was at, I got a little pointer right there. If I can get it, is Phil Hill. See there? And the car over here is an 860 Monza that Phil practiced with at the Road America 500 because the 315S that he was going to race did not show up until the very last moment. So he was using this kind of like practice makes perfect in this sense. Von Neumann, that's John Von Neumann and his wife Eleanor. They were such prominent figures in racing. And as Michael said, that the teams of Newman, Edgar, and Paravano on the West Coast, and Briggs Cunningham, and Kimberly, and further east, were kind of the major figures during these times. The people who came to the races, well, this is James Dean, of course. He was a very promising driver. A lot of people didn't know that about him, but he had great talent. And we'll get back to James later. Here is Lester with his pit baby, or one of them. Zsa Zsa Gabor was at a lot of the races. She would come with Rubiosa and just swan around. And I mean, the pits were full of people from Hollywood at that point. Women drivers of the time, Denise McCluggage and Ruth Levy. Now Ruth Raymond, but and Denise is still writing her wonderful stuff, and she's just the greatest lady. I'm sure you all know of her. Richie again in Von Neumann's TR at Hourglass, and you'll see over there, this woman right here is Jackie Holder, and on this particular weekend, Richie and Jackie announced their engagement. This woman right here is Jan Harrison, who later married Carol Shelby. And this man walking here is Dan Gurney. Bill Pollock, who will figure later in some of the ideas that got Riverside started, drove for us a number of times, starting out with the MG, and here he is in the Maserati 300S at Riverside. And we'll get back to Riverside towards the end of the program, and because that is a major point of this whole program is to talk about Riverside and how it was created and how it lived in those first few races. But the designer of the track was the William Duquette. The general manager was a man named James Peterson, and they envisioned something that would include 5 different circuits. Well, 4 of them weren't built, but the main track, the 3.275 9-turn track was, and we'll see that later on. So everybody knows this. My father started, he was going to be a racer. He busted himself up so badly when he was racing outboard hybrid planes. One came down on top of him in Biscayne Bay and just put him in a hospital for 6 months. But this was at the Dry Lakes in 1948, and also at the Dry Lakes was Phil Hill. My father went faster than Phil. He went 93, and I think Phil got a 91 through the traps. Phil went on, of course, to drive the Jaguar at Pebble Beach and won the first race there. This is Phil's Jag that he brought back from England aboard the Queen Mary. Another car that won the first best of show at Palm at Pebble Beach was the Sterling Edwards R26, a great looking car. Pollock, we talked about him a few minutes ago. Here he is in the TC at the Blimp base in Santa Ana, driving for us. RMG kind of got worked over a bit by Ernie McAfee there on the left, shaking hands with my father. And Ernie was a great engineer and mechanic, and later on a driver. He was no relationship to Jack McAfee, but Ernie was just a very special person in this whole growth of West Coast racing. Here's Jack at a hill climb that we used to go to called the Sandberg Hill Climb. It was an old part of the ridge route that was about a mile or so up the hill. And this is that's Phil Hill. Rather, it's not Phil Hill. It's I think it's Arnold Stubbs driving Phil Hill's 29 Alpha. That's me up there with the a white shirt in the background while Ernie works on RMG. The crowd at this is typical of the small events that we had back in those days. This is 1951 at the Sandberg Hill Climb. I love the Buick convertible there with the teardrop fenders and the top down. This is the Cannon Special. He's put on some dual wheels to help him get up the hill a little better. John Cannon. Roger Barlow was a big figure then. He made his first presence in the New York World's Fair races in 1940 when he was there as a documentary filmmaker. And then he got a hold of some Simcas, and this is a Simca here. There were 3 of these cars, and he was very quick in his class. And that's my father shaking hands with him right before he's off to win another race. My father driving the Bugatti that was our family car for 10 years. I learned to drive in this car. It was a 1957 C drop-head coupe that was a coupe in the 1939 World's Fair. What was it, 40? But then the drop-head body was later put on. This man over here is John Von Neumann, on the far left. Just kind of there. This is my very first professional photograph of the 166 Ferrari that Jim Kimberly brought out to race at Palm Springs in 1951, April Fool's Day. And you can see how primitive things are. That's a water truck there. And this amounts to the pits at Palm Springs, California. And Kimberly was... I'm sorry, we'll answer questions later.
No, what is happening is when you look up there, you go away from the microphone.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing that to my attention then. We'll put the microphone here. Maybe that'll work better. How's this going to be? Is that better? Okay. Kimberly was going to drive the car, and he had some illness in the family. He had to return to Chicago. So his mechanic, Marshall Lewis, drove the car. Well, everybody said, Marshall Lewis, boy, I mean, a mechanic gets into this car and he wins the race by 2 laps. What kind of a guy is he? A lot of people didn't know that Marshall was a great midget race car driver. And so it was, and for many of us, I think all of us on the West Coast, this was the first Ferrari race car that we saw in action. Meanwhile, the MG, which was a Ferrari killer in certain races, kept being refined by Ernie. It was putting out 150 horsepower at this point, supercharged with intercoolers and Lockheed brakes and 16-inch wheels and big tires and the whole bit. There was a bit of the engine, kind of a nightmare to look at, but it worked. It really went fast. And my father standing with the car at Palm Springs, where it made many appearances and had won its class. But it didn't go quite fast enough. So he turned it over to an aerodynamicist and bodybuilder named Emil Diet, who created a lot of Indy cars. And Emil built this body, this envelope body, in 30 days for the old, and it was called Old 88. That's what everybody knew this car as. And here it is paired up with Phil Hill on the Palm Springs grid with Phil is in the Cunningham, Jack is in the MG. Phil broke the clutch on the first lap, and the MG went on to win its class. So it gathered a bunch of trophies. That's Ernie and Jack with the car here in Ernie's showroom. It had a sad ending. Stanley Kramer was making a film called On the Beach, and they had written in a fiery death kind of scene. And what they did, you see the number 6 car there, that's our old MG, minus an engine, with a dummy at the wheel. It was being towed by this Jaguar here, and it ran into a Triumph. It was all set up, and it had explosives in it, and oil and fire, and it looked great in the film, but that was the end of the MG. So it never ended up in a restorer's garage or a museum. And it's kind of a pity that it didn't, but in a way, it went out with a bang. And I kind of like that idea. The races gathered momentum. Santa Barbara was a great spot. Here's Bill Stropp in a Curtis 500. You can see the variety of specials there. Some of them were frankly pretty ugly cars, but Stropp's Curtis was just, I mean, it was basically an Indy car with a sports car body on it. It was fast and strong, but it ended up in the ditch. And this is Phil passing by in his 250 mm as Stropp and some other people were trying to extract it from the ditch. It later got onto the races and was catching Phil again, and he spun out. Phil won the race handily. And this was Phil's first Ferrari. This is just to show the field at, where was this, Torrey Pines, I guess. With Curtis, Bill Murphy Curtis, to see kind of a mix of Healy, the MGs. The car you're looking at right now is the 340 America that my father brought for Henry Manuel III, after Henry, who had been accustomed to driving his Crosley in the races, bought this car from the factory and scared the hell out of himself in it. And it was very quickly for sale, so my father bought it. That's my brother Jack riding there, and this is during the time trials in Southern California. Jack McAfee kind of inherited the seat of the car, and Mopsy was a kind of a cartoonist during World War II, known by all the GIs, and we thought it would be kind of clever to bring attention to the car, because it was going to SOC bases when the races were held on the military bases. So it brought attention to it that way. Back to Palm Springs, this was, I don't know, 54, I think. You see a Singer, what is that middle car? Not sure. But, and then the 340, part of an Allard down here in the corner. We won the race. That's me.
Excuse me, Will. I think the microphone is shutting itself off. You're having a little trouble hearing? Yeah. The mic is turned itself off.
Well, that's better.
You still be able to hear?
Yeah, just a second.
Could it be a switch on the mic? No, now we're live, I think.
It's fine.
Okay. Sorry, folks. Electronics sometimes have their own mind, and that happens. Anyway, congratulated my father for Jack's win in his car. Kind of a roundabout way to do it. The car went on to Phoenix and Omaha. That's my grandmother's old limousine that we used to haul tires around in, and there's Ernie McAfee and Pat McAfee, Jack's wife, standing there. So we decided it needed a trailer, and Jack built this trailer for it. Equip Edgar, right? We took it to Omaha, Nebraska. It broke on the start line. Shelby was there. This is Carol Shelby right there. See? Oh, I didn't mean to do that. See whether I can go back a frame. Where's the wheel, huh? Yeah. This was a 340 America Coupe that was brutally crashed in Mexico, and it was Shelby's first Ferrari drive. He lasted about 40 laps in the car. I think he'd been partying a little bit the night before, and the heat got to him, and Jack McAfee came over because our car was broken. Jack took over the car and drove it to second place in the race. But it was all kind of a family gathering kind of atmosphere at these places. Meanwhile, the races in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park were getting underway in 53 and 54. There's on the far left there, that's Tony Paravano car that Ferrari that won the race, and you see a couple of Curtises in there. Mexico in 1954. My father had surveyed the race in 53 and had driven the course in 52 with my brother in the 340. So in 1954, he bought the well. Before we get on to that, that was the year of all the Lincolns and everything, and it's a great time. Before that, he bought the 375 plus 0396 AM from Canetti. This is the car that had just won Le Mans with Gonzalez and Trentino, and we were preparing it for the Mexico La Carrera Panamericana 2,000-mile race up the spine of Mexico. And this man here, unfortunately, one of his last pictures, because he was riding co-pilot with Jack, who was an old friend of Jack. He belonged to the Throttlers Hot Rod Club. They did Dry Lakes races together and everything. And the car went off the road. There's a nice color shot of the two of them together. Jack at the wheel, Ford Robinson riding passenger. We'll get back to that. This is the second place car behind Umberto Maioli. That's Phil Hill and Richie Ginther, and here Phil is congratulating Maioli, who drove solo by himself. I mean, he didn't have. Phil Phil and Richie had both driven the Mexico race several times, and Richie's job was to tell Phil to slow down. But Phil was deaf to that. Here's where our car ended up. It had been, we had two tachometers in the car and figured out that it had been going 208 miles an hour on the Tehuantepec Strait in the first day of the race. It's a 5-day race. And the differential froze up and locked the rear end and threw it into a spin and off the road into the jungle here. The car has been righted by these logs. It landed upside down. That's when Ford was killed. And I was in Korea at the time, and I heard that both men, Jack McAfee and Ford Robinson, were both killed. And then a communique came through from Mexico that said, McAfee undead. So that was you can see what it's all crunched up. The car today is in Pierre Bargagnon's collection, and it's rebodied back to the Pininfarina and worth many millions of dollars. Here it is with the Scaglietti body that replaced the crumpled Pininfarina with Jack McAfee at Torrey Pines. Santa Barbara was so much fun. It attracted a lot of people. This is a driver's meeting that shows the track behind and the old airplane hangars, and again black and white of the same picture you saw earlier, a little different pose. One of Bill Doheny's Monzas that Ernie McAfee drove. It's not the one that Ernie was killed in, but it's very similar to it. Ernie was killed at Pebble Beach in 1956. Ken Miles was there with the with the mile specials, the R1 and later the R2. This is the Troutman Barnes special. There are a lot of specials around in those days because the foreign cars are pretty expensive, and people figure that with a Corvette, with a short block, small block rather, and some ingenuity, they could make some pretty fast cars, and they did. This is the R1, Ken Miles MG, with Cy Etter at the wheel. And look at the protection he has there. Isn't it great? He's driving in his shirt sleeves with practically nothing holding him in, and a helmet that has kind of a plastic visor on it. The Pooper, as they called it, this was Pete Lovely's car. He never liked it to be called the Pooper. It was the Streamliner, as he referred to it. It had a Cooper body with a Porsche engine in it, and it was very, very fast in its class. This is Bill Murphy in a Curtis special. It was a very prominent car. Again, another special, another Curtis, basically the Indy car with a sports car body on it. This is the R2 car that was never as prominently known as the R1, but you can see that it was more advanced in its styling and attempt to do some aerodynamics with it. Ernie McAfee was a great Seata specialist. He sold Seatas, he worked on them, he drove them. This is at Santa Barbara. That's a Seata Grand Sport. And here's a Moretti that he also was selling, Moretti 750. A little tiny thing, but quite fun to drive. Santa Barbara, this is Rubiosa and Ernie McAfee and Ruby's 500 Mondial that John Von Neumann fell in love with the moment he saw it and bought it before the race was over. And there's Ruby's last drive in his car before it went to Von Neumann. Dean showed up in his Porsche Speedster. He was going into making a Giant at the time, and the reason he was late arriving at the track, he didn't get there until late Saturday because they were doing scene tests on him at Warner Brothers for Giant, and he wasn't really supposed to be driving, and he just according to his contract with him with Warner Brothers. But he did, and he was finding his way here. He was passing another car on the inside. He started 18th, and I think by the time he broke a piston, he was in 4th place. Here he is in the Speedster. There's a face that's probably familiar to some of you people. It's Vashek Pollock, the great four-cam Porsche mechanic. And Jack McAfee was standing here with Rolf Ruderich, who was a survivor of the highway accident that killed James Dean. Rolf was riding passenger and suffered a lot of injuries, but lived on, and ironically was killed in an automobile accident on the highway not too long after that in Germany. My father, after Mexico and the crash, wanted to get into Porsches, and McAfee liked that because he hated driving Ferraris. He said they were trucks, and when he drove this 550 Spider here, he said it was just a dream handling. And they were. They're really great little cars. This was the first of 3 that we had. But it wasn't long before my father got back into Ferraris, and this is an 857S that arrived a little banged up from a flight from Europe for Jack to drive at the Palm Springs race in February 1957. And the press got on this and said it was a mystery car. They didn't know what it was. It had a fin. It looked like a D-Jag, but it was a Ferrari. They made 4 of these 857Ss. What we didn't know at the time was this car had been raced before. And this is something that Mr. Ferrari and Luigi Canetti did with American customers. I don't think there was a single Ferrari that came over here that hadn't been raced before someplace, even though it was sold as new. They were used cars. And this had crashed at Dundrock under Jean de Bienne when he was a rookie there. And it went back to the factory and was repaired. Smoked a bit when we started it up. My father in the upper left there doesn't look all that happy. Jack is saying, what's going on here? But the car did have a lot of strength, and it was a good one. And we thought that maybe we could win the race with it. Jack McAfee was just a strong driver. He had great stamina. Jack the Bear, they called him. You can see why. Big guy, looks like a fighter. He was a fighter. He fought the wheel. Hated Ferraris, but he's fought the wheel. So that's the car going towards the grid. My mother there in the middle with her hat and her white coat. It was a spectacular car to look at. By the way, this car is going on auction through Gooding at Pebble Beach this year. It was going to be on the grass, but the major shareholder in the car decided that they were going to sell the car, and it's going to be a huge, huge auction item this year at Pebble. Jack was ready on the grid. Raymond Loewy is there, standing in that white jacket right there. The great design, Raymond Loewy. You can see what a great looking car this is. I wrote an article on it called Sexy Beast. It's Pete Woods and the D-Jag, and over here in Tony Paravano's 410 Special, I call it a Special because that's what it was called. It didn't have the 24 spark plugs like the 410 Sport did. It had a regular 12-cylinder, 12 spark plug engine in it. But it was still a 4.9, and Carroll Shelby was at the wheel of that. But everybody thought that Jack was going to win this one. And, well, he ran out, he ran faster than the D-Jag and ran faster than everybody else. But he didn't run faster than Shelby. And this is a frame from some of the movie footage that I have from those times that I'm eventually going to make a DVD program from racing in the 50s. But the funny story behind the large number, 185, Paravano was always the last one to get to a race. And he always drew these huge, long numbers because it was just always the last minute tinkering that he would do. They called him the man with the golden screwdriver. So Shelby was about ready to leave Paravano at that point. In 1956, for Sebring, this was the factory, the works Porsche 550 with Von Trips and Hans Hermann. We took our number 43 car. The second one up the row was the 550 that belonged to my father. 42 car is another semi-works Porsche. There's Jack at speed on the Sebring course in March 1956. We won second in index of performance. The word from von Hanstein, who ran the Porsche team, was for Von Trips to go out and either beat McAfee or blow up trying to do it. So the works cars were turning 8,000, 8,500, and we weren't going over about 7,500 in the engine revs. And fortunately for the factory, the engine lasted, and they won their class with it, and we came in second. But then we won Pebble Beach in the class under 1,500 cc. By the way, the winning car at the Sebring was purchased by my father before he left Sebring, and so we brought it east with us, or rather west with us. In April '56, also, besides the Porsche, which you saw Jack winning in, we had the 857S there. Look how tidy he is in his polished loafers and suit. Here he is on course. You see all the pine trees there. This was the old course at Pebble Beach. The car right behind him is driven by Ernie McAfee in Bill Dohany's Monza, the car in which he would be killed only shortly after this picture was taken, when he went off course, hit a hay bale, and then hit a tree and suffered a fatal injury at that point. That was the last race at Pebble Beach because of the danger of running between these pine trees. Paramount Ranch was getting started at the time. A couple of Porsches there, and well, 3 Porsches actually. Typical field of smaller cars at Paramount. Ruth Levy was driving the 550 for us, and here she is painting the numbers on it. She was a very good driver, kind of a crazy person, but she still is too. And she's proud of the fact that she is kind of crazy. Here she is in her first race in the Porsche at a very rainy Pomona race at the Pomona Fairgrounds, and that's her fiance, who was a prize-winning motion picture photographer, standing there, and she's kind of gazing off, and she doesn't know whether this is a good thing to be doing or not. But she went out and she won the race. Then she went to Stockton with the car and won there as well, but only after suffering a little bit of nose damage on it. But this time, Shelby had abandoned the Paravano ship and came over to the Edgar camp, much through the persuasion of Joe Landecker, who was also ready to move on from Paravano and his golden screwdriver. So they became just the best of buddies. I mean, these guys were made for each other. They could have been a Broadway act together. They knew how to party, they knew how to race, they knew how to have fun, and it was just a great relationship. Even though the relationship with Jack was good, the difference between Jack McAfee and Carroll Shelby was opposite ends of the pole. Jack was the serious, no party guy. Shelby was everything opposite that. But they were good friends. And this is from that shoot at the Palm Springs. My father got into the 300 SL Goldwing deal, and Paul O'Shea drove that for us several times. There's Paul and my father's business manager, Steve Mason. And also Harry Jones drove the car. And that's Harry and Vi Jones. And the car posed for some race that looks like possibly Santa Barbara. The Edgar van was probably inspired by what Briggs Cunningham had in the East. And several years before, my father decided that it was a good thing to have a big transporter, a semi. And this was outfitted beautifully inside, for those days at least, and kind of was the precursor to what we see today in all the behemoths that bring the race cars to and from the races. Joe, it's Joe Landecker, always smiling. He would cross country without sleep, driving 100 miles an hour, and that tractor trailer would go 100 miles an hour, living on peanuts and chips and soda pop. Typical trucker guy, but it was kind of a genius in sports car racing mechanics. I mean, he really did some excellent work when others might have just figured, oh, well, we can't do this or that because we don't have the right parts. But Joe would get down with a hammer and make a part, and it would run. This is the inside of the thing. It was well-stocked bar, had shortwave radios, tape recorders, cameras, you know, the whole ball of wax, 4 bunks. It became kind of a hangout for people at the races, and also it had a roof platform for viewing. This is the Porsche 550 that ran Le Mans as a coupe, and was 5th overall, first in index of performance. And this car was bought by my father to maybe be better than the 2 550s he already had. It was a 550A, but And when it went to Palm Springs, there we are with Stephanie Bruton again and the guys. This was a poster for the race. When it went to Palm Springs into the paddock here, you can see all kinds of cars and Porsches and Austin Healey's and Ferraris and God, and everything else. Way up there, this is the Edgar van way up here. Another shot from that same shoot at the Palm Springs Biltmore. This was all promotional stuff. But out of the track, it was kind of the center of focus. We had a good parking place right at start to finish. This little car, Messerschmitt. This was the pit car. Kind of a fun car to drive around in. My brother and I used to steal that, and we wore gorilla masks and terrorize people in Hollywood with it. And this is that car that came over from Le Mans, and Joe's working on it here. Jack didn't like the car immediately. He said the suspension was not as good as the older Porsches, and preferred to drive them. You can see that the Ferraris are here in the background. Here's the older Porsche over on this side. But Pete Lovely did drive the car, and he managed to get a fifth with it. But it was very shortly after that sold to Jean-Pierre Kunzel. And today it's owned by a man named Julio Palmez, who has it in Napa, California, in a wine cave, along with a collection of about 17 other very significant racing Porsches. It's an incredible collection of Longtails and 550s and RS, and you name it, it's there. Other angles on that. This is one of my favorite pictures of Carroll. Just exuding his personality, and that was one of the great things about him. Just this casual extrovert that everybody seemed to take to, and the lanky Texan showing the California boys how to do it, and he did it. My father was Jack McAfee. My father was pretty serious at the races. He was less serious sometimes between races when he had a few many scotches, but we can forgive him for that. And he did a fine job of managing the team. You'll notice here the way the hood opens on the 410 Sport. It's cut down into the fenders so you can get to the other bank of spark plugs down there. This is the 24 plug car, and that's Landecker, pardon me, working down on that side of the car, and then Harry Jones doing whatever he's doing to help Joe. We've got a nice lineup of cars that Shelby talking to. It looks like Mass and Gregory from the rear, and I would suggest that it might be. Shelby with Ima Sumac, who was a Peruvian singer who had this incredible range. I don't forget how many octaves, but she could go from earthquake lows to ear-splitting highs in the same breath almost. And there's a guy standing above Shelby in a striped shirt. That's a race fan, Dan Gurney. And this was in April 1957. Shelby's in the 410 Sport there. The lineup here, that's the old Eric Hauser special that became Old Yeller. There's an Aston Martin there, a Triumph. Shelby in the car, ready to go. And my father kind of observing from the Messerschmitt. Shelby was being chased by Phil Hill in the white Ferrari, Shelby in the 410 Sport. And it was kind of a cat and mouse all through that race in November 1956. And Shelby beat Phil to the stripe by about a half second. It was really an exciting race to watch. And it went on so long that they had to divert the airplanes that were supposed to land on the airport, runway here until the race could be over. And see, Hill is not all that happy, but Shelby is delighted. And Susan Cummings, an actor who starred in some of the television series that were at that time, and Joe Landecker is up here in the corner. It's a great picture of Shelby in his trademark bib overalls. Pomona in the rain, Shelby spun, backed into a fence and kind of wrecked the car a little bit. This was in Nassau, and this is Portago and Portago's girlfriend, whoever she happened to be at the time, Joe Landecker and Maston Gregory, and this is the 410 Sport, and here we have the 857S. This was a man who was very prominent in racing at the time. His name was Lou Brero in the D-Jag. In the D-Jag. Very hot car. Always fun and games at the races. These are just kind of silly pictures. You see Shelby and Lance Revitlow and some of the girls that were hanging around at the time, just clowning around. And this is Bob Drake and a model someplace in a car show. And Shelby with June Wilkinson. I wonder what he's looking at. Okay, there's Lester New Hampton kibitzing on something that the girls are going through. This was one of our premier sports writers at the time, Wilson Springer, in one of his less serious moments. Lester kind of giving his opinion of a number of things. Mopsy again. Jan Harrison in Jim Kimberly's car. And here's Jan giving the trophy to a kind of a bleary-eyed Jack McAfee after he won a race. And Shelby enjoying the checkered flag again at Palm Springs. The 300S was a car that Shelby never really cared much about. You see Steve Mason sitting on the back, Shelby at the wheel. This was in Cotati in Northern California. Shelby broke the clutch immediately on the start. He had to drive the whole race without a clutch. Won the race, and stopped short of the start and finish and had to walk back at the end. But being the winner, he wore this kidney belt, and that came from what my father used to talk about, how important that is. My father having raced boats, and Shelby did this to protect his kidneys because my father only had one from serious jolting and accidents. It was probably a good idea. Back to Palm Springs. This car was the 300S that you've seen earlier. It was the car that Moss drove at Sebring in 1957 to finish second behind Fangio. Moss and Shell against Fangio and Barra. So my father bought that car from Maserati, and we took it immediately to Palm Springs. He's still running the Moss number 20 here in practice. Excuse me, just let me move on to, this is Jim Hall in a Lotus 15. A couple of years after that, but I just wanted to have Jim in here to see what he was driving before he got into the chaparrals. On this, I'll take a little drink of water so you can look at these people. Probably figure out who they are. Shelby in the 300S. My mother, right behind him, and that's me with the stopwatch. And my wife, Patty, at the time. Called the sunglasses picture. Here's the same car on the grid there, and this is interesting. This is a 121 LM. Pardon me. 120. 121 LM here that Phil Hill is in. This, I think I'm losing my voice. If you can just hold a minute, please. The middle car is a Monza that Bob Drake is sitting in, and on the far right that's Shelby in the 300S. Interesting thing about this picture is those two Paravano cars, those two Paravano Ferraris, were the last time that Paravano Ferraris or any Paravano cars showed up, because they were all commandeered by the U.S. Marshals. Paravano owned these cars and many others. At one time, he owned in 1956, $57, $500,000 for the cars, and that was a lot of cars. You could buy these cars for $25,000, $30,000. But he had back taxes amounting to something like $1.4 million, and the marshals moved in on him and confiscated everything, and that was the end of Tony Paravano. But not quite. He disappeared later for some mysterious reasons nobody ever has figured out. This is a side view of the same thing, being Shelby, Drake, and Hill. Hill won the race. Shelby was second, and I forget where Drake went. So we didn't stay in California. We moved on to Elkhart Lake. Took the 450S Maserati that we've been waiting for so long, and the 300S, but the 450 had races to run yet at other tracks, and the 500 miles we thought would probably not be good for it. So Shelby drove the 300S, six-cylinder car. The pits at Road America. Kind of, this is called open pit time, right? This is Phil Hill's 315S that Gene Greenspun brought to the track. It had just earlier that year won the Mille Miglia with Taruffi. It was a very, very powerful car. 4.1 or 4.8, I'm not sure. This was during a pit stop, and you can see the very advanced fueling system that they have here. Phil had to go to the outhouse, but he took the keys with him because Gene was there just dying to get into the car and drive it. Well, neither Phil nor Canetti nor anybody else that knew anything about Gene's driving experience and techniques and talent wanted him to get in the car and drove it. So Phil drove the car solo the whole 500 miles, as did Shelby. But Phil's getting back, and he's probably got the key in the other hand. And they're just finishing off the fuel. You can even see the fuel going in here. This guy has good aim, because otherwise it would have gone up. There's a dent in the car right there. When Phil got out of the car, he put that dent in it. And so that's the Hill dent. I don't know whether it's still there or not. Probably not. And Shelby goes off and chases him with the 300S. But even with a handicap, it just wasn't fast enough to overtake Hill in the 315S. And here it is on the track. And Hill won. Shelby was second. Hawaii. This is my mother and Duke Kahanamoku, who was a famous Olympic star and surfing champion and swimmer. This was at Dillingham Field, Oahu, territory of Hawaii. This was before Hawaii was a state, 1957, Easter Sunday. That's why the hat. And the sunglasses were typical of my mother, though. That's kind of her trademark. Lance Revitlow was there with his mother, Barbara Hutton, the Woolworth millionaires that so much was written about. She was married to Cary Grant and Austrian count and all kinds of people. But Lance was, of course, later on the man who brought us the Scarab. But here he is in our 550 Porsche, and right behind him is Von Neumann in the Ferrari. on the grid at Dillingham Field. Meanwhile, his mother was back at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel, into her cups, as was my father, also at the Royal Hawaiian, into his cups, and they were on the phone together. And throughout the racing out at Dillingham Field, which was about a 30-minute drive from the Royal Hawaiian, Babs Hutton and John Edgar carried on this ridiculous, kind of hazy conversation about why they were in Hawaii. It had nothing to do with the races, I guess. Phil Hill was there to drive the 410 Sport. And you can see that how slim at Lake Shelby looked at this kidney thing. But Phil was going to drive this 410 Sport in the race. My father had signed a contract with Maserati to drive the 450S, for Shelby to drive the 450S. Well, we didn't know, or didn't pay much attention to it maybe, that the fine print of the contract said that no one could drive a Ferrari from the Edgar team. So Phil was very disappointed. He was going to drive this in the race and most likely win the race. I mean, this was a very strong car. We didn't have the 450S yet. All we had was the 300S. It would have certainly beaten that and probably everything else on the thing. But they did have a speed contest down the 3,800 foot straightaway, and Phil did manage to get the fastest time of the meet with 165.12 miles an hour in the 410. That made him happy, but not. It didn't replace his desire to drive the race itself. And here you can see Phil and Shelby discussing their disappointment probably with Joe Landecker. Meanwhile, out on the grid, Shelby was having all the fun, right? And Lance, and this is Liz Hughes. Where are you, Liz? Maybe Liz and Stephanie are someplace together. That's, well, part of the racing. More sober side, Joe's looking at something on the dash with Shelby just before the race. This car here was an Alpha. One of the, I forget the designation on that. It's one of the, you guys will know what it is. It's so, what is it, the A? We can, yeah, that's right. It belonged to a man named Gillespie. And Gillespie loaned this car to Lou Brero to drive. And that car is the car that caught fire and killed Lou at the track that day. There's Lou in the middle, his son, Lou Jr., and Shelby before the race, obviously. Lou's Jaguar sat on the side while Lou drove the Gillespie car. Phil Hill, this was after the race at the ceremony. Phil Hill helped Lou get into the ambulance, which was a station wagon. That's how ill-equipped they were. And Lou wanted a cigarette, so he said, "Phil, have you got a cigarette?" And Phil pulled out a cigarette. I don't think, possibly it wasn't Phil's, but he got a cigarette, and he lit it for Lou and handed it to him, and they took him off to the hospital, and later that day, he died. It was a sad time. Phil finally did get to drive the 410 Sport in competition. This is at a very rainy preliminary at Santa Barbara in May of 1957. He came in third with the car. Phil was a little leery of my father. Phil's parents were alcoholics, and it's a pretty well-known fact, so I'm not disclosing anything here. But my father was a heavy drinker at times, and Phil didn't know what people who drank a lot might do from one moment to the next. And the night before the race, in other words, this was the preliminary. The next night, or that night, my father walked into a room. I was sharing a room with Phil. I was in one twin bed. Phil was in the other there. And my father walked in at 3 o'clock in the morning reciting Shakespeare. He thought that the Hill, who was a great aficionado of literature and everything, might appreciate that, but not at 3 o'clock in the morning before a race. And this is the kind of thing that Phil just, that really turned him off. So the next day he drove the car. It placed poorly in the race, and that was the last time he ever drove a car for us. After Pebble Beach and the death of Ernie McAfee and the closure of the track because of the pine trees, they moved over to a new track that the Army Corps of Engineers had built called Laguna Seca. And they still call it Pebble Beach. You can see it, Pebble Beach at Laguna Seca. So, meanwhile, the 857S that we'd had been sold to Stan Sugarman, and Richie Ginther drove the car at that race. This is Shelby in the 300S. Look at the way everything was kind of turned around at Laguna Seca then. The pits were on the other side. People along the snow fences and everything. It's still a good crowd. I mean, this is 1957, the opening. It was November 20th, the first race at Laguna Seca. So our car, with Shelby at the wheel, won the first big bore race there in the preliminary 5-lap race. But then in the main, Shelby's a little bit out of shape here. He's behind Von Neumann, and coming around the bend there is Pete Lovely in a Ferrari. Well, Shelby got mixed up with the hay bales. He had a pretty bad time with that main there. He finally finished 4th, but this is a picture that shows Von Neumann crossing the line, but right behind him is Pete Lovely, and this is not the last lap, but Pete caught Von Neumann napping a bit in turn 11, and he got around him, and Von Neumann missed a gear, and Pete went on to win the race. So that was the first main one at Laguna Seca. Here's Shelby after the race with Peter Apollo, the Indianapolis winner, great friend of racing in those days. A lot of watering holes around Palm Springs. This was the George Streby's dollhouse at the north end of town. See my father here and Madison Gregory, and looks like they're having a pretty good time. We finally got the 450S. This is that car right here. This was at Palm Springs in 1957. Well, it'll come to me in the next picture. 1958, April 1958. He won the preliminary race in this car. This was after the car had won. We're getting a little out of sequence here. This is after the car had won the opener at Virginia International Raceway with Shelby at the wheel. It was after it won a number of other races, including races in the East. But here it was getting rather long. It had already won Riverside. This was April '58. It was getting a little long in the tooth. And even though he won the preliminary in it, the brakes burned up. Here he is winning the preliminary with Al Torres, the leaping Al Torres with the flag. But this man here, in an old beat-up short wheelbase 375 plus that belonged to Frank Arciera, a winemaker, won the race. And it was Dan's 27th birthday, April 13th, 1958. Shelby finished second in the 410 Sport, which was standing by as a second car because the 450 broke. And that was the last time Shelby drove the 410 Sport. Here's Dan getting the flag. And he had already made his name at the Riverside track by by finishing second to Shelby a year earlier. But here this is a great picture of Dan and Sam Hanks and Dan's best friend, Skip Hudson, and this is Frank Arciero, and this is Frank Jr., and this is a guy who's trying to be famous. Don't know his name. This is kind of a nice picture of Vashek Pollock and Rolf Wuzerich in a von Neumann Porsche at Hourglass Field in 1957. Hourglass replaced Torrey Pines just like Laguna Seca replaced Pebble Beach. Richie Ginther in one of von Neumann's Ferraris and a woman named Jackie Holder. And this weekend, in October 20th, 1957, is the day that they announced their engagement. You can see Skip Hudson standing right there. Jim Hall in his Maserati, and Shelby and Jan Harrison, who Shelby was married. And over here again, we have Rolf, and I don't know who that is. But this is Jim Kimberly in an Oscar at Palm Springs. We'd not frequently see the Eastern drivers come to Palm Springs, but they did, and we were always eager to see what they had to run. The 450S, this was one of the last things that it ran in Nassau. It was pretty beat up by then, and it had a tire change, and they had to push start it to, or actually I think they jumped the battery or something. But it was disqualified because it had to start on its own. This was as the era was kind of winding down. Shot of my father in Maston. These are just kind of nice personality shots. Maston always with a Coke bottle and a cigarette. Shelby finished out his racing career by winning the April 1st, 1960 race at Riverside in this birdcage Maserati, and then later in the year drove his last race also in a birdcage when he barely got through the second heat of the race because of his heart, and he was taking he had the nitroglycerin pills under his tongue, and that really finished his racing career, his race driving career in October of 1960. And here he is being interviewed after that race. Kind of the end of a driving era for him. But the new stuff was coming along. This is Lance pointing out some of the advantages and potentials of the Scarab, and Shelby saying, I might be able to make a Cobra. Probably did get quite a few ideas from what was going on there, you know. Nice Chevrolet engine and a California-built chassis. Shelby and Jan got married. This is in the parking lot in Tijuana, Baja California, in Mexico, in 1960. My mother, Jan Harrison, Shelby and my father, and my father's Rolls Royce there. Marriage didn't last too long, but Jan and Shelby stayed friends for many years afterwards, and just a great woman. I really liked her a lot, and so did Shelby. They were very, very, very good friends. She had divorced a veterinarian to marry Shelby, and when they broke up, then she married a veterinarian again. Let's see, get the little pointer going. Okay, now we're going to get into the Riverside Raceway. I went out there one day in the summer of 1957 with my then wife Patty and my Nikon camera, and shot these Kodachrome slides of the track as it was being built. And I've never seen any pictures, color pictures of it like this, and it's kind of a treat to just. That's my wife Patty and Ted Davis, who was kind of one of the construction workers, foreman, who took us around in this Jeep around the course before it was paved. Here you see the bulldozers at work. This looks like someplace on the back stretch, back straight. This man here very likely is if I can get the pointer going down there. Right there is very likely James Peterson, who was the contractor. This is what the countryside looked like on this 500-acre parcel of land that where the track was built. 50 acres of it, the portion that where the track was actually built, was a turkey farm. These are the Box Spring Mountains up behind here, and Dan Gurney and Skip Hudson used to ride their dirt bikes around this thing as it was being built. This really brings back what it looked like before it was a really workable track. And the pavement was laid down in July of '57, and then they had a press day. You can see there's a Von Neumann car there and a Paravano, an old ex-Paravano car, and you know, this was just going around the track for press and promotion for the track. The track had run into real problems. It was an idea of Rudy Clay to build a European type road race course in California. Rudy was a Dutch. He had been to all the races in Europe, of course, and he knew what they had over there. So he kind of kept this idea alive, even though they ran out of funding very early on to build this, way before this picture was taken, because here we have a completed track. But Rudy owned a restaurant in Hollywood called the Blarney Castle, and my father was frequented the Blarney Castle often, and they had Sports Car Club of America, Cow Club meetings there. And they got together, and Rudy said, well, John, why don't you help us with this thing and maybe put in some money on it. So my father really virtually financed the construction of the track. And that's how it got made, and just barely in time, because by opening day in September 21st, 1957, it had just been finished enough to race on. And here you see the Lieutenant Governor, what's his name, Butch. Anyway, the reason the cowboy boots, he was on his way to Barstow to be the Grand Marshal in a rodeo, and he landed his airplane on the main straight. He came over and cut the ribbon, and this is the general manager of the track, Elliott Forbes Robinson. As soon as he cut the ribbon, he got back in the airplane and flew on to Barstow to head out the rodeo. But that was it, September 21st, 1957. And here you can see this, here's Robbie on the far left, and this is Peterson standing next to the Lieutenant Governor, and then Rudy Clay, and I'm not sure who this other person is, standing next to the 300 SL convertible. This picture shows people there at the first race. The man on the far left is Steve Mason, who was the general manager of the track and also my father's business manager and race manager. Next to him is Pedro Rodriguez, and then Rudy Clay, and then Ricardo Rodriguez, and Elliott Forbes Robinson, father of EFR. And here we have the Rodriguez boys again, Pedro, and this is Papa Rodriguez, who got his sons into racing and probably regretted it in life, but because they were both killed, as we all know. Rudy Clay, and Ricardo, and again, Robbie. Dan Gurney, John Von Neumann, Phil Hill, and Skip Hudson at the track at Riverside. This is Mason and Landecker and Shelby. Jan Harrison, and this was before Shelby and Jan were married, was chosen to be the race queen for the opening race. Shelby was in the new 450S Maserati. My father finally got delivery on after almost 200 days after ordering it, because the Ferrari, or rather the Maserati factory, wanted to keep it. It was winning races, and so the customer in California, far away, had to wait. But, and this is a nice shot, kind of a pose shot with Shelby and Jan that Lester took, and then my father had his Rolleiflex there that day, and he shot this nice candid shot in color of them, which I really like. It's look how long and lanky Shelby is there, and lean and mean. Bill Pollock would drive the 300S at that first race. Pollock was one of the earliest promoters of a track like Riverside, and he kind of dropped out of the scene after it got going, but he and Rudy Clay and some other people were very enthusiastic to have Riverside built, even though it was going to be someplace else at first. This is what happened to Shelby in the 450S. First lap of practice, the track was dirty. It had some sand on it. He skidded in the sand and parked it nose first into an embankment. Really did like super damage to the front end, that damage that Joe Landecker couldn't even fix with a mallet. And Shelby cut his face up. He had to have a number of stitches across his upper lip and nose. So he was out. Both cars were out of the running for that opening race at Riverside. This is my old dirt bike here, that we turned into a pit bike, the Triumph Cub. So this was the start of the first race, first main at Riverside. You have Chuck Day in the Troutman Barn Special. Here's Pete Woods in a D-Jag, and Bob Drake in the RC Aero 375mm that Gurney would later drive in the next race at Riverside. And here you have Richie Ginther in our 410 Sport running an old Von Neumann number 211. Here's Richie up in turn 6. The car was really performing well, and it was such a brutally hot day. And Richie was just a little guy, but he managed to stick with it and just really give it everything he had, and won the race. Even though Shelby was out, here comes another car owned by my father to win the first race at virtually his track. So it was kind of a nice outcome as it was. But you can see the pain and agony on Richie's face here. I mean, the guy was just almost died, I think. And my father was very concerned about him. But he pulled through, and he was a real trooper, and won it all. And Pollock was third in the Maserati. So it was a good turnout. In November, just a couple of months later, we were back with Shelby, all healed up. My father, Jan Harrison, my wife Patty, and myself. I wish I had that Ferrari jacket still. I think it went to my ex-wife. And from there, I have no idea where it went. But here was the guy, you know, he'd won a Corvette race. And, you know, some people knew him as that guy Gurney. but nobody really knew him as Dan Gurney. Here he was sitting on the grid for the November 17th race. The bitter cold, wind was blowing. He was in this kind of a clunker 375 mm that Frank Arciero had. The car was just really worn out, but there was new talent at the wheel, and he really drove the car well. Shelby led after the first couple of laps, and then on lap 4 or 5, I forget which one it was, he spun and almost everybody went past him. He spun in the 450S here, Maserati. So then he got what he always liked to say, he got Texas mad, and he went after the field. And here he is up in turn 6 chasing Walt Hangston in a Briggs Cunningham D-type, fuel injected. Shelby was such a strong driver. He was heavy into the corners and heavy out of the corners, and just was so good. This was Masson Gregory and Temple Buell's 4.7 liter Maserati. Had a marine engine in it. He was also in the chase. But eventually Shelby got around Walt, and he only had to chase down Gurney then, and this was just a few laps before the finish of the race. And he did manage to get past Gurney, but Gurney, even though Shelby won the race, Gurney won the fame. He was second to Carroll Shelby on a national SCCA event in a Ferrari that wasn't supposed to probably make it more than halfway through the race. The carburetors were full of stones, and it was just barely making it to the end. And this really gave the name Dan Gurney to this kid who was the son of an opera singer who came out to California with all of his Speed Age magazines on tow, and learned what it was to be a champion that he was. But Shelby, here in the light of the it was November, so it was dark, almost dark, by the time the race finished. My dad there, Shelby, Jan Harrison. It's a funny guy here named Frank Alton. He was at all the races, and he has a little microphone there. I'd love to know where Frank's tapes are, and probably the people at the center would like to know too, because he would get in there, get recordings, get comments. What happened to them? We'll have to find out. There were a number of last laps at Riverside because it kept saying, well, no more. This is it. Then there'd be another race, another race, another race. And I went out to this one in, I think this was the 4th of July weekend in 1988, which was almost the last lap, but not quite. There was another race after this. Here you can see Lothar Moschenbacher in the Cobra with the last lap of Riverside dealing, and he's holding a checkered flag there. And this is Lothar's wife waving the flag, and it was a great day. Hot as hell, as it usually was at Riverside. And that kind of ended the era of Riverside International Raceway and moved it into the realm of tract housing and shopping malls, which is where it is now. And it's kind of a real shame, but that's what happened with Southern California real estate becoming as expensive as it was. Ontario Motor Speedway tried to make a go of it, and they failed. They're just, it was the end of an era, and as Shelby used to say, it was a great era, and it'll never come back again. But it does in a way, because these cars show up.
Here's Bruce Meyer with some familiar people, Jean Tott and Bruce Meyer's wife and John's wife, in the first production Cobra, CSX 2001. And it won Best of Show at the Quail Lodge a few years back. This car was never raced, but it was a, no, I'll take that back, it was raced. It was raced. It was raced in Europe. This is a typical lineup of cars today at Infineon Raceway, which has now, just in the last few days, been officially renamed Sonoma Raceway. One of the Shelby Comp Cobras. And this is that car that you saw in the beginning that Tazio Nuvolari drove to win the German Grand Prix in 1935, now seated by its present owner, John Shirley, at one of the races out at, well, all the old guys call it Sears Point. I'll call it Sears Point. Just want to go back once on that. There. This is Butch Dennison, and he's responsible for restoring the Alpha HC 2900B coupe that won the first race at Watkins Glen. And it was restored by Butch in 2008, and 60 years after it won the race here, it won Best of Show at Pebble Beach. So that car lives on. Not this car we're looking at. This is the P3 Alpha. But the 2.9 Alpha Coupe, you're all pretty much familiar with that. This is Bob Lee and his Cabriolet. He's got a great collection up in. There are a lot of these collectors who have these cars. Some of them race their cars, like Ranson Webster has a great collection, and he races his Porsches. But so many of them, well, this was never a race car. It was actually it was built. It wasn't built for, but it was owned by Peter Collins. And here's that wonderful Alpha that won the first Watkins Glen race, that Butch Dennison restored because John Shirley had the wherewithal to buy the thing and to have it restored to its original beauty. John uses it for touring. It doesn't just sit. He doesn't race it. But a week or 2 weeks after the Pebble Beach, this was in August 2008, he took it on the 1,000-mile HC tour. So, as it should be, it was driven, and driven well. And this is a shot that I made from the ramp there at Pebble Beach. I've been following the car for, since the prior November. This was August. Because when I saw it in Butch Dennison's shop in Bare Metal, I said, Butch, this is the car that's going to win. And he said, oh, come on. How do you know that? I said, I just feel it. It's talking to me. And when I saw this car roll up on the ramp there and win Best of Show, I called my editor at Octane Magazine. I said, the car that I've been following since November just won Best of Show, and I'm going to do an article on it. And you're not going to argue with me on that, are you? And I did. These are two guys. First, Phil Hill. We all know so much about Phil, who recently passed. It's been a little while now, a few years, but you saw so much of them in the show here today. This was one of his last drives in an Alpha GT at Laguna Seca. But I shot this picture. He was being interviewed. This was at his tribute at the Peterson Museum. Love this photograph of him. I shot this. I shot this. This was Phil's last event. This is Derek Hill and his wife Alma. And he was still talking to anyone who would come up to him. He died 13 days later. This was at the Quail, his last motoring event. Went into the hospital right after this and died in Monterey, where he won in the Jag. Shelby used to tell me, I'd call him up and say, Shell, what you doing? He said, well, God damn it, Bill. He called me Bill then. He says, you got to take me 3 days at a time. What do you want? I said, well, we're supposed to be doing this article, aren't we? Oh, yeah. Okay, well, let's do that then. You know, and then we'd stay on the phone for an hour. He always had this defense, you know, he'd throw this defense out. You got to take me 3 days or not. Well, I can't do that. But he kind of mellowed in his last days, and Cleo told me this story. His widow, Bill Warner, was on the phone, on the cell phone. He was in the hospital. This was in February of this year. And he'd been on a ventilator and everything. He was in really, really bad shape. And he heard Cleo say, let me get a picture of Shelby here. He heard Cleo say, well, Bill, he's just not going to be able to make it. And from his bed, he said, Cleo, is that Bill Warner you're talking to? And she said, yeah, I'm just explaining you're not going to be able to make it over to the Amelia Island, which was, a month later. He said, well, tell him I'll be there. Tell him I'll be there. I'll be there. He kept saying over and over again. I mean, the guy was on his deathbed, but he just wanted to be there. This is him at, in his heyday when he was doing the Cobras and the Mustangs, and I like this picture. This is from Shelby, America. It's a promotional shot, but it's really a nice picture of him, I think. And this is a shot that I made when we paid tribute to him at the Peterson Museum in 2007. And you recognize a few people here. John Morton, Bob Bondurant, Shell, of course. Who's this here? Somebody knows. Cleo, Jim Hall, Parnelli, Billy Krause, an old-time friend of Shelby's. I forgot his name. I said, Shell, give me a thumbs up. You like this? Yeah, okay. Cleo cocked her knee there a little bit. She's a great woman.
Well, thank you so much, Will Edgar. I think we've all had a wonderful, wonderful time. I think let's limit the questions a little bit, because I think Will is understandably probably pretty exhausted, and we probably all want to go over and get some food, and we can buttonhole Will over at the center. I hope you all come back and look at the things we have, perhaps support us with a book purchase or a raffle ticket. But whether you do or not, we're thrilled that you're all here today, and we're especially thrilled with Will. Let's take a couple of questions, though, now. Rick Huey is saying that everything raced at Riverside. They had everything, including Formula One and NASCAR and everything in between. And do you have a response to that, Will?
Yeah, this was just that first year, the first two races. But you're right, everything did come after that, and in great quantity, and it was just a great venue for, as you say, the Formula One, the Can-Am, USAC. I mean, I think Gurney won here 5 times. Was it 5 or, yeah? They called him Mr. Riverside. Les Richter did a great job, running the track, being president for many years. It was a real show place, even though it was hotter than hell a lot of the times you were there. That first race in September 22nd, 1957, people were falling over with heat stroke, and it was just terrible. There wasn't enough water out there, and the facilities, like I said, it was just barely open in time. And there was a driver killed that day as well, up in turn 6. So it was a little shaky start, but they managed through the years, and it went on for almost 30 years. Yeah.
Well, those early pictures showed it was way out in the country, and wasn't really the real estate values that killed it? Was it still financially viable as a racetrack?
No, it was. My father paid what? I'm trying to think what he paid for it. Paid $1,000 an acre, and he sold it for $550, I think. So it hadn't appreciated that much by 1960 when he did sell it. But later on, when Riverside expanded, when Moreno Valley, that whole Moreno Valley there, just started growing like crazy as bedroom communities and everything, and the property values went way up, and that's why they just couldn't do it anymore. But they've got a really good museum there now, so if any of you are in Southern California, you can look it up, Google it, find out how to get in contact with the people there at the museum, and go out and see the stuff. They've got some really, really good.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Will, I think it's Doug Mockett who runs that museum, and he's a terrific guy. I'm so glad that Will ended with a piece on Carol Shelby, who we all miss, who's so recently gone. Also Phil Hill, who meant so much to this research center. Many of you in the audience remember when he was here in I think, '05, and what he meant to all of us, as did Shelby. I think we're all ready to go next door. Let's close by thanking Will Edgar and for a unique and wonderful presentation.
I'm very pleased to have been here to share these pictures with you and some of the stories. And even though I'm not that versed on some of the, it's hard to do this, to talk to pictures and everything like that. I've got, my notes. We've written the book and everything like that, but it's fun. I hope you enjoyed the fun of it.
I think that dog wants to go someplace.
When she hears races, she gets in the car.
She's a real racing dog.
Yeah.
And they asked like who won 3 times, the major series, whatever it was. And nobody knew. They're all saying Dale Earnhardt, Tony Stewart. Just a minute, I want to see. That was such a pretty.
Did you enjoy it, Al?
I had a good time.
I thought so too. So did I.
So are we getting Dolly on the road here?
Well, he wants to see me, so we'll be here for a few more minutes.
if there is.
We took the same tour 5 years ago. But since then, BMW, Mercedes, and Porsche have had brand new museums.
I bet there is. Kings of the Road, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got the-
Wonderful,
I've got that on my shelf.
wonderful chapter on that little area.
I think there is too. I haven't picked that up in